Internet, it's Gino, that Pinguino Grieco, here again with another special episode of Deep Listens. This time, I am joined by my fellow Giant Bomb moderator. He died for your sins, Chris Zombie Pie Redacted. You don't get to know any more than that. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm doing good. So, context for why there is this special episode this week, and we should have another one hopefully coming soon, is that you and I made a very stupid bet.
One of the dumbest bets I've ever done, personally.
Okay, so your end of the bet was by far stupider than my end of the bet. But my end of the bet was to play Myst, and then because I finished Myst too quickly, I then played Riven, and then played all of the Pajama Sam games that could run. And your half of the bet.
And even then, you still had far more free time than me, by like a solid 2 months.
Well, that's because your part of the bet was... Why don't you say your part of the bet?
My part of the bet was I had to play Final Fantasy VIII from beginning to end, and that was my first Final Fantasy game ever played.
Yeah. So this episode is not going to be the Final Fantasy VIII part. We're going to discuss adventure games, get that out of the way first, and then we will dig in deep, as Deep Listens is wont to do, on Final Fantasy VIII, because I feel like that one's going to be a bit more of a slog to talk about.
We got a lot to talk about. I got some opinions. But we have to talk about Myst.
We do. Myst,
yeah,
and Riven, and Pajama Sam. You know, these games that they just belong in a dialogue with one another.
They bring the adventure game narrative all together. The state of 90s era adventure games. Myst and Pajama Sam.
It's just the farthest end of each spectrum. One that takes itself intensely seriously and is kind of executed poorly on a technical level in some ways. And then this other game that doesn't give a shit because it's for kids and it's just kind of happy and fun and enjoyable, that is just supremely competent.
And they were released relatively around the same time. That was the weird thing, is you kind of have different areas and different philosophies in terms of the adventure game format. Myst is probably the more well-known format of the 90s era adventure games. I mean, so many games would later go on to emulate that style of adventure game time and time again. And it was something to where not even the developers of Myst were able to take their ideas and create something that was just as important or just as revelatory as the original Myst. And certainly that's something we'll talk about when we talk about Riven.
Yeah. So why don't we start with Myst? So you're a adventure game aficionado.
I was a fan of both the Cyan works as well as the Sierra Online works. I was never the biggest LucasArts guy. It wasn't until much later in my life when I finally discovered Monkey Island and anything by Tim Schafer. The first Tim Schafer game I ever played was Psychonauts, so that's where Tim Schafer began for me.
Yes.
And yeah, that's a great game.
Yes,
but also
it
that's a game with kind of like a lot of Tim Schafer's works. There's a lot of weird caveats to Psychonauts that I think some people forget about because of its whimsy and it's just pure good artistic design. But Myst is probably, without a doubt, getting kind of back on topic, one of the most important games from the 90s. You have to remember, in the context of the 90s, I mean, you played Myst, your mom played Myst, your mom's boss played Myst, and your cat probably played Myst while it was chasing after mice. Everyone was playing Myst, and it was kind of one of those few games where not even people who didn't normally play video games would not be able to talk about Myst. Everyone was talking about Myst. It was something that kind of became a part of, especially in terms of adventure games, it provided a boost. You have to remember, like after Monkey Island, after Sierra kind of died off, Myst was, as well as kind of The Longest Journey, a push towards rejuvenating the adventure game format. And for better or for worse, I mean, Myst had consequences, but it was also this major event. I mean, how many adventure games can you think of besides the big ones back in the day, back in the early PC days, that had like 5 sequels to it? So Myst went up to 5. A few adventure games went that far or had that longevity and continued to reiterate on its ideas. And
It's
certainly, if you decide to go down that rabbit hole, because I know it's hard, Myst gets even weirder. Myst gets even more ridiculous. But that longevity and that kind of impact, it's something that's worth understanding and appreciating.
Yeah, and it's kind of extra impressive because Myst and Riven, they are so hard to repeat just in terms of the production value and the amount of custom work that had to go in. Like the amount of technology that had to be simply innovated because it looked like Cyan either didn't have access to the budget or some of the expertise that other teams did or the infrastructure. So it was just kind of a bunch of people who decided to make an adventure game and they decided to do it in the most difficult way possible, like rendering a full 3D world when a lot of people were either doing full motion video or um, doing 2D, like hand animated, a lot of pixel art and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And yet they tried to do a full 3D world with full motion video and all these weird like sound effects, and the world
yeah.
at the time, the fidelity of the graphics was really impressive even though it was all pre-rendered. Like it's just kind of astounding the feat of engineering that had to go in to make that game even possible. And then on top of it, they just tried to come up with a whole bunch of really high-minded ideas for how the
Yeah.
game would be and how the story would be told, and they were super innovative. I don't know. I'm not a huge adventure game person, but the idea of just kind of being dropped into the
A
world of
world.
Myst with no direction
Yeah.
other than, your cursor kind of changes shapes when you can click, and then you just kind of click around and the story unfolds around you. That's really different, at least from
And
my
that
experience.
highlights kind of one of the most distinctive things about Myst and something that kind of doesn't exist anymore, and that is Myst's stark investment in minimalism. I mean, that hand you see on the floating and the screen floating, that's you. You click on stuff, and anything that you see, you can actually click on. And besides, an introductory letter that you get at the very, very beginning of the game that tells you some stuff about the characters and an evil wizard and some basic technical information. You got no character bios, you have no historical background, and really no tips. And this is a key here, no tips in terms of how to go from point A to point B, or what is point A and what is point B. You have to figure that out yourself. And in some ways, that's undefensible. It's kind of like how there's a reason why a game like Myst would probably not be made today. It's notorious for having those weird machines, which probably we'll talk about later, where there are crazy locks and there's stuff that's just standing in front of you, and you have to literally be pixel hunting. And the idea that, or claim that, Myst is full of intuitively placed puzzles that reward everyday logic is indefensible. You can't make that argument. But the thing about it is that what information is in the screen is actually kind of clever. And they're basically kind of like three golden rules with any puzzle. If you see a machine, it needs power. Um, if there's a symbol in the game, you got to write it down. I know you avoided writing any notes down, but
Oh no no
back in the
no!
day,
I wrote a ton of notes for this just because
yeah, you
you
had
have
to.
to. There,
You have to. There's a language in the game that they created, which is insane. It's as if, you know, they committed to their world. And
well, that's more Riven than it is Myst.
yeah. And the last kind of golden rule is like the more inescapable the back of an object is, the more likely there's something important in the back. That was just one of those weird things that you had to kind of like look behind the doors, look under elevators. Is there an area that you can reach the other way around? Are you sure that that mop is there just to be window dressing? You had to be kind of sure. And it's kind of like when, you know, and this is a bit of a spoiler, when you told me when I was playing Final Fantasy VIII, no, you got to go around and you got to click everything. You got to interact with everything. And Myst has that design, but it's a little bit more necessary than, say, JRPGs or other adventure games. Like, actually being a part of the environment and being a part of Myst is far more important than you would think. And then it's a game where you can read books, and the books are actually really cool.
Yeah, and they're story significant, but not gameplay significant in a lot of ways, which is nice. A lot of times in, I guess, even adventure games of the era, because I watched Backflips and Bioforge, and a lot of times it looked like audio logs and text logs were used as just hiding places for passwords, and that is not how Myst treats its literature. There are sometimes some charts that you need to copy, or maybe some translations that you might need, but otherwise, in Riven, there's a little bit more of like password hidden within a book. But in Myst itself, in Myst proper, the books are there to add texture to the world and not necessarily to just be the solution to a problem, which I thought was very clever. And you said something about Myst not really having identifiable real-world objects that help inform how puzzles need to be solved. And I would say that Myst actually does, to a certain extent.
To a certain extent, there's a caveat with that, and I think I know what you're going to say, but I'll let you go.
Yeah, so in Myst, everything really flows through the main building, the library.
Yeah.
You just need to turn kind of a clock tower to you turn the building to face each of the machines, and when you line them up, there's a plaque in the library that will just have a solution to whatever the problem was. Whatever input that machine takes, it's written out in plain text in that library. And so as long as you figure out that that is the hub of information, you're pretty much okay. Now, figuring out that that's the hub of information and how you need to do that, I actually stumbled upon it by accident.
Yeah.
But if you figure that out, everything flows pretty easily. I could, however, also see never figuring that out and then just wandering around clicking on things, because there are a bunch of objects that you can click on that don't have a clear and obvious use, like the marker boxes, and each of the individual puzzle objects can be interacted with without knowing the solution. So you might think you can stumble upon it when that's really not the way that the game wants you to play. However, once you then get that basic information from the library, you can then apply it pretty easily, because the machines are made out of recognizable machine parts. So there's a clock tower that looks like a clock. You can tell the hint, I believe, mentions the angle of hours or a time. And so you can recognize, okay, this is time, there's a clock, I need to probably adjust the clock to match this time. Or I believe there's a vault in the place with the boiler, and it gives you a combination, and so you know how to use a combination. There's one that gives you dates, and then you have to look at a star chart, and that one again is pretty simple, because I got dates, and here's a thing it's an observatory that takes dates, and I guess it shows you time, the stars, like what the stars look like on these particular dates, and then I just copy down what the constellation looks like on that particular day. And so, constellations, clocks, vaults, even a piano, like these are things that are recognizable real-world objects, and then once you go to Riven, like all that shit just gets thrown out. So,
yeah, that's what I was going to say is the caveat. That all you're saying is really interesting and a good idea. And in fact, Myst at least has a logic. And then it all disappears for Riven. And I don't know if you actually read into kind of like the history behind Riven and kind of why Riven was what it was. But just a little context. I think it's very clear that Myst was created by a small team. And that is kind of part of why it's a masterpiece. It was a small team, and it was not meant to be the runaway hit that it became. And then Cyan got a multi-million-dollar budget, and they were able to create a game that was essentially, I believe, 5 discs at the time. And so they doubled down. They made a big game that was just bloated, and it was still the Myst experience, but they felt like they had to make a game that was for the real fans, and they just kind of lost sight of the simplicity and the minimalism of what made Myst special. And then after that, they started licensing off Myst to other developers. Myst 3 was, I believe, designed by the creators of the Journeyman project. And then Myst 4 was straight up made by Ubisoft Montreal, the team that would later go on to like make Assassin's Creed.
And Child of Light.
Yeah.
Which I actually talked about on my last podcast.
Yeah, Ubisoft Montreal made Myst 4, which is why a lot of people don't like Myst 4. But there's another... And then Myst 5, Cyan came back, and then it was just kind of the farewell gift to the longtime fans. But the real reason why that was the case is they went on to use all of the money they got from licensing to develop an MMORPG called Uru. And I don't know if you did any research, but it was probably one of the most catastrophic things in, like, that early 2000s era, other than maybe like Looking Glass Entertainment and kind of Daikatana. But Uru was just based off of like this ill-conceived idea that they could make an MMO based off of Myst, and they just spent millions of dollars, and it never came together. And they spent years making it, and it was just this doomed idea that single-handedly just totally bankrupted Cyan, and as a result, the series has never quite recovered, because after Myst, they always felt like they needed to add more, have a new environment, have new characters. And then, as you can kind of see with Riven, more live-action, real-time acting, which was never good in the first Myst, so I don't know why they thought they needed to include more scenes with the actors. But you start to kind of see the inklings of why Myst kind of fell apart.
I think that what you see is that they did not know why Myst was so good. They did not understand at all what the success of their creation was. And here's where, focus testers get a real bad rap. Focus test groups get a real bad rap because a lot of times that is used as a shorthand for design by committee and groupthink governing design instead of creatives. But you know what it's really useful for? Figuring out why someone likes something. If you ask enough people why they like something, you're probably going to get an idea of what the actual appeal of your product was, and not necessarily what you, as the creator, think should be the appeal. And those like the full motion scenes in Myst, totally effective. The actors, way better than they have any right to be.
Absolutely.
However...
They take up too much time of the game, and especially with Riven, it's just window dressing. It was better to discover that information rather than have someone just speak on end and on end.
Yeah, and in Riven they don't talk too much, but in Myst it's also cryptic.
Yeah.
And so when it is cryptic, it is beautiful. You see, it's important that until the very end of Myst, all you hear of the two brothers is like them fading in and out, like saying, you only hear like one of every 3 words that they say, and they slowly come into focus. Like, they are at their most effective, I think, when you're only getting a word here or there, and you're seeing what's the blue brother?
Huh?
The blue brother. There's two brothers.
Oh, God.
Sirius or...
Sirius. Yeah. Cirrus, the evil one.
Well, they're both evil, but...
They're both evil, yeah. But
the evil backstabby one, and then the super maniacally insane one.
Who essentially becomes a Bond villain, like, hilariously so.
Yeah. But, I guess, whoever Agarus or Agamemnon or whatever that... He begins with an A.
Agamemnon. I believe it is Agamemnon.
It's not his real name. When I was writing up my Myst, write-ups... I just came up with different ridiculous A names for him because his name was so dumb. But, well, all the characters in Myst have kind of dumb names.
Yeah.
But that's fine.
I mean, yes, the humans were not the biggest draw for Myst or Riven. But even if we sound like we're being kind of a bummer on Riven, Riven is still an interesting experience. It's an experiment where they doubled down on something. Not necessarily did they double down on the correct parts of Myst. I think Riven deserves credit for creating what can only be described as one of the biggest kind of worlds, interactable worlds, in an early 90s, late 90s to early 2000 game. It creates a rather large, significant, explorable, interactive world. And you can see like the time that they put into creating that world. You can see the craft that they put into it. It's just that in order to interact and get to see everything in that game, you just got to do some of the dumbest stuff and most obtuse stuff, and it's Byzantine in its design in order to get to everything.
Yep. And
But there is a craft to it. There is an interesting aspect to Riven. And when you see it's kind of like it's real, what it really has to offer, it's actually rather interesting and
yeah,
cool
I
to
think
see.
one of the things that jumps out about both of these games in just through looking through modern eyes is that they are both still visually stunning, even if
Yeah.
they are not visually impressive. It's no longer a technological feat what they are achieving, but what they were able to do aesthetically and creating kind of a sense of mystery, and there's even a little danger in Myst and
I
in
was going to
Riven.
mention how Myst is one of the most isolating games in the world. It's really just you. And that's probably one of its most distinctive aspects is how it creates this livable, breathable world, and it just has this strong sense of isolation and being alone. And it adds to this kind of mystery. The kind of Myst has a mystery to it that you have to discover. Why is no one here? Why is this abandoned? What is going on in this world? And that I feel like is one of the better aspects of Myst and even Riven.
Yeah, and that's what's so amazing is just that it is not a horror game. Myst is not a
No.
horror game, but the sounds and the tones and the lived in environments that are devoid of people makes you feel as though something could jump out at you at any moment, or
Yeah.
you might open a door and behind it is a body, and behind it is some piece of these people that are gone, because it's so clear that someone shaped this world around you. And so when I got to, I think it was the mechanical age. That's the one with the big
Yeah.
rotating thing in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once I got to that age and found the two, so in every world, the two brothers have their own kind of share of that world. Um, the red dude's area will be super opulent,
Yep.
and I just love that he has a backstabbing dagger in every one of his drawers
Yeah. But
for
like
backstabs.
stop and kind of let's stop and kind of highlight one of Mist's most interesting aspects. Each of the worlds is really distinct. Like the
Mm-hmm.
mechanical age is definitely different from the other ages that you see. And the idea of each of the worlds and even the very first Myst, it's distinct and there is a sense of discovery. And that motivates you to try and get through these puzzles as obtuse and as Byzantine as they may be. You're motivated to see the next area or the next age or the next world because it has a real character to it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's got a really interesting setting for it.
Yeah, and it's kind of incredible that for each of them, each of the worlds kind of draws upon some sort of real world influence, but it does not feel like a cheap reproduction of that. So the mechanical age has some trappings of medieval Europe. Um, the Red Brother, I forget his name. Ah, I'm just gonna look up their names. I know fact checking will be the end of this podcast, but let me just look up their names just because.
Like and in terms of like the very first Myst, I feel like the stone ship, the ship being stuck inside this gigantic rock is probably one of the most weird and like it sets the tone perfectly. And you're stuck in a place that is not normal and it's a fantasy world. It's there's a ship stuck in a rock, a gigantic rock. And then
Yeah,
there's yeah,
no, it's Cirrus and Arcanar are the brothers. So Cirrus, in the mechanical age, Cirrus's room is decked out almost like a throne room
yeah.
you would imagine in some sort of medieval castle. Arcanar's room looks like the dungeon.
Yeah.
He's got, torture devices, electrical chairs, morning stars. And then when you open their they each have a little side panel that lets you into their kind of secret room. and Arcanar's is full of poison and severed heads, and Sirius's is full of gold and jewels. It's just amazing to see kind of how the human hands have touched this, and you can feel the developers drawing influences from places, and yet still managing to create things that feel so foreign. The ships feel like they could be pirate ships, but they're embedded in stone, and there's no people anywhere to be found. And then when you finally get inside the stone and find kind of, again, where Arcanar and Sirius's rooms are, that almost feels like a secret bunker.
Yeah.
Like there's electricity and there are secret switches and stuff. There's even crawl spaces. And so it blends this technology with kind of these more primitive eras, or at least these time periods that we would, from our current perspective, see as primitive, like the Channelwood Age, where it looks like, there's tree-dwelling people who, I guess it looks vaguely Native American, like the architecture, but you've got this setup where water is flowing and it's being guided to power, electrically power machines. And then you find in, if I remember correctly, Arcanar's room, he's got a recording of himself that plays in 3D, looking like some sort of demon god thing. And so it's just all of these layers of different designs and different ages and technologies that makes everything feel, on the one hand, familiar, and on the other hand, wildly foreign. I love it. I love the way these games look.
And the games are very subtle. Like, you have to connect your own dots in order to get anything. When you played Riven, you got into Gen's bedroom, right?
Yes, I think you have to. Once
Yeah,
you get you need his journal to finish
yeah,
the game.
and you played the video with the woman saying gibberish, right?
Yes.
Did you translate that?
No.
So I guess I'll just tell you what she's saying. I think some players actually memorized the language. She's like saying, "Gen, I love you. Don't do this," or something like that. And when you stop and think about it, he's been in confinement for like, what, 30 years? And that's the only kind of video that he has. So just stop and think about how many times that he's probably watched that video over and over again. And it's just those little things to where there was a reason why that video was there. There's a reason why everything is there. And the one thing about it is that the interesting thing about Riven, and it's something where you kind of have to stop and think about it. There's ultimately only 2 puzzles in Riven. 2 puzzles. But they're the puzzles that you have to keep working on as you go. And those 2 larger puzzles, they're head scratchers. And there's no hints. There's really nothing to help you, nothing to guide you. And all of the smaller and kind of like more obtuse challenges, like opening doors and changing bridges or putting power into machinery, those ones are whatever. Those ones are usually easy, but
if they're not easy, they're just annoying. It's not like there's a logic there that you need to figure out. It's, did you click everywhere? Yes, no. If no, fuck you. Yeah, so just going back to how you mentioned that Riven, it's really 2 puzzles.
Yes.
2 huge, incredibly obtuse puzzles.
Huge puzzles.
But Myst is kind of the same way. It is all one puzzle.
Yes.
It is one gigantic puzzle, and once you get the solution, you can beat the game in a minute.
Yeah.
And that's incredible.
That is awesome. And yeah, I mean, and you have to imagine, in order to create that one puzzle, that interconnected single puzzle, that took time and that took a lot of effort. And it's like a Rube Goldberg machine, but the way that the puzzle finally comes together is really, really compelling. And it's like that was always a problem with a lot of the Myst clones and like the clones of it. They would just have a bunch of lever and gear puzzles, and they would never have, and they would have like the static images, but they would never have the ultimate payoff, or the idea that, all of this is going to into building something, building one thing, or solving something that comes together. It would just be a bunch of interconnected random puzzles and levers and bridges, and you were treated to a little talking here, a little talking here, and then the game was over. And a bunch of static images that had just all this steampunk stuff all over the place.
Yeah, and it's amazing that in Myst, once you there's a very light inventory system.
Yes.
You can hold one page at a time of these red and blue books, and I think that's it. Like I think that's all that you can carry really.
Yeah.
And eventually the white page that you need, but everything mechanically building that aspect of the game, the ability to hold up one page at a time and all that, it leads you to think that the pages are going to be the thing that matter.
Yeah.
Because inventory systems are so important within adventure games ordinarily, that if you can hold something, that's usually what's important. However, in Myst, the real important solution to the larger puzzle, which is the marker boxes, is actually told in two ripped pieces of paper.
Yeah.
One is in the Pirate Age, or the Rock Age, whatever that age is, and the other half is in the Channelwood Age, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't carry those. You have to write each of those halves of those papers down to be able to solve the problem, which is, I think, really impressive. Just that for all of the work that you're going to get these pages and put them in the books, that's only going to get you the bad ending. The good ending comes from searching all of these drawers and then finding these halves of paper and writing them down. Because all of these mechanics actually are not as important as writing down these as finding these two pieces of paper. And to be fair, to actually beat the game, if you were playing from scratch, you do need to get those papers, because one of the two brothers will tell you then the combination to then get to Atris's book. So you need to get the pages at least once. But once you've done that, the real solution is not in getting another page. It is in applying that knowledge of those two ripped pages to get the white page, and then talking to Atris. But it's crazy that they built that entire they built an inventory system. They acquiesced to, that's one of the only nods to classic adventure game design that's in Myst at all, and it's false. It's a red herring.
Yeah. And visiting the islands in Riven and having the islands tell the story of why Gen is evil and how he's this despotic, horrible person that's just ruining the environment. That is the best part. How there's just one island that's almost completely destroyed in order to have his paper, in order to produce paper and books, and then another island's just been totally devastated to have a factory that's, in order to further Gen's militia and having cool stuff and trinkets and technology, and how the islands are not just there for the sake of eye candy, but they tell and inform you more about what Gen is doing and why Gen is a bad guy. And it tells that story without saying a lot. And it tells its story by investing in that environment and the importance of that environment and kind of interacting with these worlds.
And it tells that story visually while still remaining almost completely foreign in the way it looks and the way it behaves. It somehow conveys what these islands might have looked like before Gen gets there, and what it looks like currently, to let you know that there was this gigantic shifting effect of Gen, without telling you or showing you pictures or anything of what the islands looked like before. And on top of that, the islands look like nothing you've ever seen.
Yeah. They're all distinctive worlds. They all have a distinctive look to them.
And I just love how they tie in Gen's his own personal history with the islands.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember what the connection is between Gen and the islands, but he created Riven.
Yes, he did.
So, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, it's just very cool that Riven is ultimately a game about an author.
Yes.
It's about an author who becomes lost in his own work,
Yes.
literally.
And then
And
it's kind of there's other elements of like, well, if he's the creator of Riven, does he have the power to destroy it and ruin it? And is it okay for him to be doing what he's doing to the world of Riven? And it actually brings up some major points. I just wish that the fact that there are other endings, there had been more, and this is like part of this is an old game. Like there had been more of a dilemma in terms of like Gen being this not white and black, but also a kind of tragic figure more than kind of like this nefarious villain.
yeah,
And there's really only one ending, even though they might point out that there's multiple endings to Riven. There's really only one ending. As much as I think it's hilarious that Gen will kill you if you annoy him really bad, there's really only one ending to Riven.
hmm
And
yeah, and he definitely. It was very funny. Like they tell you early on, don't open the Starfield or whatever that is. Just don't
yep.
do it.
And if you open this, don't. And of course, what's the first thing that I did? I opened the fucking
I opened that
Starforge.
Starfield, and then Gen shows up from somehow he gets over to that area of the world in like 2 seconds and then shoots you to death.
Yeah, he shoots you to death. And like I said, if you respond to him in a certain way, you can just totally annoy Gen, and he will kill you. And it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious. And then the game's over. But
Yeah, I just there were definitely some annoyances, like the part where you have to pixel hunt for just some of the basic information was really annoying. Um, let's talk about the two big puzzles because Myst, there's a big puzzle. It's pretty self-explanatory. Once they give
yes,
you the solution, you plug it in. As long as you've explored, it's pretty easy to know what you're supposed to do. And then the game wraps up pretty nicely.
it does.
Atris tells you what was up. He says, "All my sons were evil. I'm gonna go deal with them." Zap zap. And then it is pretty cold that he blows his sons up.
Yeah.
Um, but then you're just kind of left back in the world, and you can watch Atris write forever. But Myst wraps up really nicely. It's really self-contained, very efficient. Riven is not efficient. Riven is not efficient in its
Well, there's that
knowledge.
one opening. There's that something's up when, like, in one of the very first obstacles, is there's this wooden door with a padlock on it, and it prevents access to, was it a cave? And
It looks like a cave.
you could spend quite some time looking for a key. You can look forever for a key. You can walk down the halls. You can walk around the world. You're not going to get that key. You're not going to get that key unless you look for a very, very specific thing. And yeah, that was like the moment where it's like, really, is this like there was nothing like that in Myst. I mean, certainly Myst had its own kind of weird logic, but it was in the framework of you're in a fantasy world. Right off the bat, door with a padlock, and you got to find the key.
There is
And
no key.
there is no key. That's the big reveal, is there's no key.
You have to click, and then when you click down, you go under. You crouch. This is the only place in the game where you fucking crouch. You crouch and you go under the door.
Yeah.
I like the design decision to do that. You can walk around. There are two machines in that area that you think you might like. It's very easy to imagine thinking that you could interact with those, and you can't.
Yeah.
There's no interacting with it. They're completely useless until you find information later on in the game. There's nothing you can do. Maybe you can trigger the Starfield if you click around enough and figure out that there's like a weird latch on the side of the observatory thing.
Yeah.
That would be the fastest speed run ever.
And then there was the spider chair that's actually recording you and using it can project things. That's a weird one.
And that doesn't do anything.
Nope.
There's a switch on it, and you open something, and then once you open it, turns out that's all that does.
There's a bunch of bridge puzzles in Riven. I forgot, watching you, reading your blog, I forgot how many times you have to extend bridges. Although, we'll talk about it. There sure is a lot of climbing ladders in Final Fantasy VIII. I don't think you
There's-
remember that.
No, I remember it. I'm going to be playing that game again in the near future.
But there's some BS puzzles. There's some BS. So let's go to our two big puzzles. I'll let you
Okay.
take this one.
Okay, so there are two big puzzles. There is, as I affectionately call them, there's Satan's Baby Choo Choo,
Yep.
which is a circle of animals that you need to figure out what animals you need to pick in this horrible circle based on the sounds that they make.
Yeah.
And you need to figure out the Riven numerical system in order to figure out what order they are in.
So the
it is-
Choo Choo one is kind of them showcasing. You got to remember that they wanted to show off. Part of Riven's design was they wanted to show off how they had a bigger budget, a bigger team, and not only did the look of the game improve, but they spent a lot of money on their audio design. They hired multiple audio technicians, and so those puzzles were put in there to show, hey, we want to show you how much better Riven is in comparison to Myst. You got to solve these puzzles by listening to the game.
Yes,
Now,
and not only
there's a problem.
it's worth mentioning those animals on that wheel are not real animals for the most
No.
part. They are weird made-up creatures that you will never have heard the sound that they make in all likelihood. There's a frog that sounds kind of like a frog and a scarab that sounds like a scarab. Those are the two animals that sound like an animal you've heard. Then there's a wark, which makes some sort of weird noise, and then there's some weird things called sunners that look like manatees had sex with weird aquatic dinosaurs, and they're really upsetting.
Those ones are cool. Those ones are really cool, though.
They're cool looking, but in terms of being able to identify the sound they make, because you're going to need that for a elaborate
But you
puzzle.
could go to the location and see them, and then hear what they sounded like, and then go back to the puzzle.
Yeah, but you needed to do that so many times to figure out that that was what you needed to do.
So there was a reason why those animals were there in the first place.
Oh, there's a reason, but the reason... Basically, if I was playing this in 1998 or 9 when this came out, I think it was 9 when Riven came out, every single one of those islands is a separate disc.
Yeah.
Which means that every time I wanted to hear that wark
Yeah,
make its
that's-
warky noise, I would
You
need
had
to
to
leave that island, change
Pop out
discs,
a disc.
and then go back to that island so that I could hear that 1 second soundbite, so that I could then go and rotate an eye that will make that wark sound, and something in my brain has to click and say, that's the same sound. Even though the warks actually, when I wrote down what that sound sounded like, it sounded like wood to me, like someone scraping wood. And I thought I was going to have to find like a wooden object or something like that. Turns out it was an animal.
Yeah.
Like the clicking noise that the frogs make, that sounded to me like, again, like a flute or some sort of weird, not a flute, but,
The frogs were pretty bad. And then also figuring, I know we've moved on from Myst. The puzzle with the frogs in Myst.
Which puzzle? There's frogs in Myst?
Wait, is Riven the one where you have to capture the frogs in the colander?
Yeah, that's Riven.
Okay, that's Riven.
If it's bullshit, it's Riven.
Yeah.
If it's 90% just nonsense, it's probably Riven. Myst has its nonsense. The worst that Myst gets is going through the labyrinth.
Oh yeah, the labyrinth is a legitimately
Fucked experience.
It's not the best experience, but it's a cool visual. It's a really interesting world.
Yeah, and the idea of having sounds that tell you where you are in the labyrinth, that's really clever. However, figuring that out when it's like an 18-step labyrinth crawl, it's just really time-consuming and frustrating.
Okay,
But-
so we've got the Choo Choo Train of Doom.
Yeah, there's Satan's Baby Choo Choo, and then there is the second puzzle,
Which is
the-
worse.
which is
I
the
think the
Devil's
second puzzle is
Tiddlywinks.
worse. I think the second puzzle is way worse than the first. I know that some
Yeah.
people that like back in the day that a lot of people hated the first puzzle because you actually did have to pop in discs here and there. I think the second puzzle is way worse.
I
Yeah.
don't mind. So actually, I am of the opinion I hate Satan's Baby Choo Choo more than the Devil's Tiddlywinks.
Oh, okay.
I
Sure.
think the marble puzzle is not as bad just because the parts of the marble puzzle actually appear as though they are puzzle pieces at the time. You can identify them and look at them and say, that's probably a puzzle. Whereas the animals, you don't know that they're puzzle pieces. The only reason you would know that they're puzzle pieces is that Cyan is so meticulous as a developer that if they went to the trouble to create something, it's probably important. Except all the people who you run into. They're just there for flavor.
But you had to get all the pieces to that puzzle, and then all of those little... That was annoying, and...
Oh, it's certainly annoying. But I at least was... I'll put it to you this way. In my notes, I had notes on each of the marbles and what color they should be and what color corresponded to what island. All that stuff I had figured out for the most part. The only thing that bothered me was then there's an island that is basically just letting you figure out where in this marble grid you need to insert... Where in this grid you need to insert each of these marbles. There's an entire island whose only function seems to be letting you figure that out for some reason. And that was annoying because it's like 3D mapping in this really ugly format by modern computer standards. So it was hard for me to tell, like, on this grid, where is this dome?
Yeah.
But at least I knew it was a puzzle. At least I knew that this was a solution that was probably going to be useful at some point. Whereas, like, I didn't think that the scarab buzzing around my head all the time was going to be a puzzle solution. I thought it was just going to be an annoyance or, world building.
Yeah. But the real villain of Riven is doors. The real true villain of Riven are doors.
It's doors. It's double doors that you think are closed, but they're not closed, or doors that you think can't be opened, but really you can go under them. Or doors that have openings on one side and you can see them, but you have to go all the way around the world to open that door. Yeah, you're not wrong. The true enemy was doors all along.
So, did you get the slight Easter egg where Gen actually will start singing to you if you just stay around for long enough?
No.
He sings.
Is that when you're trapped in the cage?
Yeah, he will start singing to you if you don't do anything, but then it means that almost immediately you will die. But he starts singing to you. I would say look up that video. It's kind of funny. That actor is great. I wonder. I hope he's not dead.
Yeah, the actor who plays Gen is like all the actors in Riven have chops. Did you ever, in the village in Riven, did you ever click on the one door that you can actually access?
Yes, I did.
Enough times for it to open?
Yes, I did. It was one of those things where I did that well after the fact.
That was horrifying.
Yes, it is.
And that's, I think, one of those things where it's a payoff of Myst, and as you mentioned, that kind of stark sense of loneliness that's in that game. And then in Riven, when you see another human face, or something resembling a human face, it's so striking. Like, at a certain point, I was amazed in Riven just clicking around, seeing other people. Because after the Myst experience, I just was so conditioned to not expect it. Seeing a person staring you right in the eyes, like really close to you, in that game was... I thought that was one of the coolest things in Riven, oddly enough. And it's something that you can completely miss if you don't click enough times. But
yeah,
Riven's a very cool game. I would recommend it, but I would recommend it with a guide. Like, just don't...
Yeah, the problem is that technically, the game has the hints. The animals are right there, but it doesn't have the decency of, like, telling you, hey, there's a reason why these animals are here.
Yeah, and same thing, like, when you figure out the number system, it doesn't tell you, like, hey, there's a number system, you're going to need to know it. You just go into a room that looks like a classroom, and it's not actually on the board or anything, or it's not like the number system is written down. There's what is essentially a game of hangman, but with people dangling in front of a giant fish mouth. And you just need to figure out that, like, however many pips that thing dips, that is the number that is on the bottom of the thing. And so it was cool. I figured out the number system pretty organically, but I could see someone who was being less attentive just not understanding. And so I think both of these games are excellent. I'm really... Thank you for giving me the opportunity to play them. Even though... those fucking doors in Riven.
I like how when I helped you, I guided you through that part. You were not happy when you finally realized what had been done.
No, no, I wasn't, because after Myst
You need to
doesn't do
explain
that.
for those that didn't watch your video explaining why these
Yeah,
doors are the worst.
that's true. Yes. So in Riven, there is a island with a boiler on it, and on Boiler Island is a secret laboratory. So at a certain point, you gain access to one of the side rooms of this secret laboratory, and it's got some giant ass stone doors that you need to open to get inside. Once you're inside, it is pitch black except for the light that is coming in through the door. Um, there's a walkway down in there that will lead you to a colander where you can catch frogs, and that seems to be all you can do on Boiler Island. However, what the game wants you to do is shut the doors behind you from the
Yeah.
inside when that is the only source of light. And then once you shut that door from the inside, it turns out that the doors being open, those open doors were blocking paths to both sides of that doorway. And it was the worst. Because I explored that island, I solved the colander puzzle, I caught a frog, I solved the boiler puzzle, I explored thoroughly, and the only barrier to me actually getting to almost the end of the game, it was like getting to the big crux of those two big puzzles, was clicking on a door and closing it from the inside, which is something you would never. Why would you ever do that? No one
Hmm.
would ever do that unless you're playing an adventure game, and you're just conditioned to click everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it's just the worst. And then they actually managed to use that exact same bullshit logic on in the very next room. Like
Yeah.
once you go down the stairs, there's another door that does that again. And it's just like the biggest fuck you.
Yeah.
Like if you were designing a 3D space, this would never be a problem because you could see that there's like a door behind this door. But because of the perspective tricks that Riven uses, it that's actually a puzzle. That's actually a real problem. But it just upsets me on so many different levels as someone who fancies himself a bit of a designer.
Yeah.
Like it's just so unintuitive, and it's such an all or nothing puzzle. Either you understand it or you stumble upon it and it's not a problem at all, or it gates you completely.
Yeah.
There's no figuring out and appreciating the logic. Like I can appreciate the meticulous craft that went into creating the scarabs and all those different animals and crafting their sounds and then having them play all the time so that you just the ambiance eventually weighs down on you and you figure out the puzzle just because you've been in Riven for so long. But that doesn't happen when you're just in this dark room. You don't stumble upon this amazing revelation. You just click on the wrong thing once and then you figure out the solution. It's the worst. Yeah. So Riven's the best and Riven's the worst. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Gen is the worst. Though I do like the language. I like the people. I like Atris's what is Atris's wife's name? Catherine.
Catherine.
I
Catherine.
like her. I love the world that the moiety own. That like weird hive looking place. I
Yeah.
love the story about authors and kind of writing their own worlds and then becoming really invested in them. I think there's it's great. That's worth unpacking. Like you could write something about the story of Riven, which is I think really interesting in a game that deals so much in audio and so much in video that there's also kind of this subtle subtext that it's just a brilliant game. It's a shame that the puzzles are so poorly designed.
And you kind of highlighted something to where one of the things is they really spent a lot of time creating this world, and but also they spent so much time creating the world of Riven, they removed one of my favorite parts of Myst, which was the different worlds and ages. And there's really only one world in Riven, and it's Riven. And there's a lot to Riven, but there's no kind of like there's just these islands within Riven, and it's almost like yeah, they forgot about this big thing that was one of the main appeals of Myst was man, it's like this new world, this new interactable environment.
Yeah,
But
and getting lost in books was like that metaphor was really powerful, I think, in Myst. That you found this book and it transported you someplace else. And in Riven, that doesn't happen until like very near the end of the game. And each of the islands, though they are visually distinct, so many of them are barren, other than Gen's contraptions, that it doesn't convey that same sense of wonder that traveling to, like, once I finally figured out the spaceship and went to the spaceship world in Myst, that was so cool. Like, that barren, foggy landscape versus Riven, which is, like, there's the main island, which has this giant dome, and it's got this forest, and that's really cool. But then some of the side ones are like, okay, here's an island with a boiler on it. And here's an island with a cool rock formation, but not really a lot to do. Like, I think the moment that I really found awestruck in Riven was when, I forget which island it is, but one of the islands has an elevator that goes down. And you actually end up in, like, this magma tube.
Yeah, the magma. The lava kind of caves. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it for me. That and when that woman opened her door. Like, those were the moments for me that Riven became something more than the sum of its parts. Yeah. Other than, you know, in retrospect and kind of analyzing it. But those floored me for a bit. Even in, thanks 1999 game.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why don't we take a quick break after discussing Riven and Myst, and then we will come back and then discuss a little bit of Pajama Sam. Hard turns.
Yeah, Pajama Sam, and I'm going to bring up Putt-Putt. I love Putt-Putt.
Yeah,
you need to play Putt-Putt. We got to go back to Putt-Putt.
Putt-Putt.
We should both should play Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo.
I still have in a drawer at my house a disc copy of Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo.
I think I've lost my disc copy of Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo.
You goofed. So, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a sec. All right.
Bye.
All right, and we're back. Now we're going to be talking about Pajama Sam, or as Zombie Pie here likes to say,
Wham Bam Pajama Sam.
You gotta work on your delivery.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
Wham Bam Pajama Sam.
Wham Bam Pajama Sam.
It's Wacky Larry.
So how old were you when you played some of these educational? Can we really call Pajama Sam educational?
It educates in a way.
It educates how to, like, I learned a lot about using a computer, like different buttons and how to, like, be tactile with a visual interface.
It is not completely educational. Most of the education is, oddly enough, it's just good moral story. Like, you know, the moral of the stories tend to be solid, and then there's some nice vocabulary and stuff that's in the game. But in terms of the logic, like, the logic is pretty fantastical at times, so I don't even know that applies. Like, maybe you'll learn a little bit, like, apples grow on trees.
Yeah.
If you don't know that, I don't know. But learning that, you know, entering the land of darkness doesn't really teach you anything.
As we talked about Myst, no one is making these games anymore. No one. No one makes a game like Pajama Sam that's clearly for a younger audience, and it's not pandering or... Well, I guess you could say Nintendo kind of shoots for a younger audience, but they're the one exception of no one makes a game like Pajama Sam anymore.
Or at least if they're making it, it is so far off my radar that I wouldn't know. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like, the Adventure Time games or any of the Cartoon Network games were this kind of game. But I certainly am not aware of it, and I am not the target audience, whereas I am always the target audience for Pajama Sam.
Or Putt-Putt.
Or Putt-Putt. The zoo's in trouble, Putt-Putt. Go save it with your dog, Dirty Larry. What is the dog's actual name? It's probably not Dirty Larry.
Skip or something like that. Spot. How is it that there are animals and there's also anthropomorphic cars? We're getting off topic, but that was something where it's like, so there's organic life and then inorganic life. That's weird.
Yeah, that's true. It is Putt Putt and his dog. It just says Putt Putt and his dog. What? No one has reverence for Putt Putt. Oh, Pep. His dog is
Pep.
Pep.
You could color Putt Putt different colors if you got to the special station.
Yeah, you could paint him. We're getting off topic. Putt Putt is
Yes.
not Pajama Sam.
Mm.
This is a
We
serious
should
thing.
we should both get Putt Putt and then play that game.
Yeah, that would be a bet that we could both get behind instead of one of us finishing early and then the other person.
Okay, yeah. So Pajama Sam.
Yeah, so
What was the first game? You played multiple Pajama Sams, or was it just one?
I played three.
You
The
played
the
all
three
three.
that work.
Trilogy. Yep.
The fourth one apparently was not made by Humongous. I guess the Pajama Sam license got bought, and the
Yes.
fourth game is apparently a travesty. But it's extra travesty on the PC because it doesn't run. It does not run on my machine. Apparently, it doesn't run on any Windows 7 machines at all.
Good.
Ever.
That's awesome. Let's
Yeah, so
get that DOS box, son.
don't be tricked by Pajama Sam 4. If you're going to buy the Pajama Sam Party Pack on Steam, Pajama Sam 4 is a boondoggle.
Well, you're still getting Pajama Sam's 1 through 3.
And you're getting Pajama Sam's sock sorting adventure, I think.
Which is not great.
No, but it exists, and I have it. Thank goodness. But yeah, so Pajama Sam is actually startlingly well made. Like
Those early games from Humongous were almost always solidly made. And was that when Humongous was kind of under the word of Ron Gilbert still? I think it may have been. And he brought in a lot of like good talent. I think at one point, like John Romero was assisting Humongous in making games, and they had some like really good talent behind those games, and a lot of people who knew what they were doing.
yeah, that explains
And
the Satanism in Pajama Sam.
I believe so. I believe
John
he made
Romero was there.
he didn't like make it per se, but he assisted in the development of one of the Pajama Sam games.
Just put some pentagrams. You should
some
put some
pentagram.
pentagrams over here and my head.
Yeah. So we can come to an agreement. Pajama Sam is awesome.
Yeah. I'm not even as much as I want to say that it's just nostalgia. Like those games are just really solidly made. Like all of the obtuse puzzle design and bullshit that we just talked about with Riven and Myst
Does not exist.
does not exist. Those games are really streamlined. They are self-explanatory. Like some of the nods, I don't know if you listened to, I think it was one of the more recent Beastcasts, Giant Bomb Beastcasts, with Rich Gallup,
Yes.
formerly of GameSpot, currently of Disruptor Beam.
Well, formerly of certain studio run by a Boston Red Sox after
Yes.
GameStop.
Pour one out for 38 Studios. But he mentioned on that podcast, if you want to do a good thought exercise, try and design a game and then imagine that your target audience can't read and then how your design has to change. I think he was talking about designing for kids.
Yeah.
And that is something that Humongous actually did
Yeah.
in the 90s. Like, they assumed very little of their audience in terms of how they could interact with the machine. They did not have, like, text inputs. They did not have spelling challenges. The game read any text that showed up on the screen. If you clicked on it, Sam would read it to you.
Yeah.
And it's little things like that that are just everywhere in Pajama Sam. It's incredible. Just how much foresight and thought went into all of that. But it was not lost on me just thinking that there's not a lot of text, but just knowing that every single one of them has to be narrated because you can't assume that a 6-year-old is going to be able to read it, even though you would hope that, a 6-year-old can read. It's
that
not a given.
also led to Humongous and the designers of the Pajama Sam games and most of the games that they made, Freddy the Fish as well as Putt Putt, they realized that if we're going to put a puzzle in this game, it can't be time sensitive, it can't be You got to fetch something all the way on the opposite side of the world. You have to vocalize what the purpose of that is. And so it's one of the most streamlined experiences. You like you and me, if we played Pajama Sam and you played Pajama Sam, you can get it done pretty quick. But as a kid, it's like you got to go slowly, and the game does explain things slowly. There's no level of frustration when you click on an object multiple times. Um, Everything that they needed to do to reach their audience, they did it. And they did it with almost 100% accuracy.
Yeah, and there is that certain adventure game to get item, combine item, use item on thing. It is.
But there's no fail state. There's no fail state.
No, you cannot. You're not gonna die. Eventually, if you click around enough, you will find the solution, which I think is a big difference between that and some of the LucasArts games that Ron Gilbert is known for as well. And I think it's just one of the things that struck me again playing it now is that I don't know if you remember this, but the Pajama Sam games have multiple puzzles.
They do.
I don't mean multiple puzzles meaning like there's more than one puzzle in the game. I mean,
Oh,
in each game you need to find 3 things or 4
yes.
things depending on which game it is. And those items can be in different locations depending on which instance of the game.
I forgot that. I remember there was something like that in. Well, no, yeah, there was something like that in Putt Putt Saves the Zoo, where you had to save certain animals in different orders, and so yeah, there was that. But that's a whole nother level. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, so in the first Pajama Sam, there are 3 items you need. You need Sam's mask, you need a flashlight, and you need a lunchbox.
Mm-hmm.
And each of those items can be in one of 2 locations depending on what seed you get when you start the game.
Yeah.
And the puzzle that you need to solve to get that item changes depending on which seed you get.
Yeah.
So, for example, the mask, if you get the good seed, the mask is on a carrot.
Yep.
And you meet the best character in all of Pajama Sam, the carrot.
The carrots are the best.
Carrot's the best. I don't know if you read my write-up of Carrot.
Carrot
But he's a communist.
He's a communist. But
when you try to... what are we saying?
No, you keep going.
No, when you try to take the mask from him, the first thing he says is, ownership is theft. Which is amazing.
Yeah.
He says ownership is theft, and then you need to help him and the rest of the Salad Liberation Front.
Salad Liberation Front. I forgot about that part, too. Oh, God.
Yep, and then you eventually take him to a room where everything sings, and you can click on all the objects, and they'll sing, and you need to use him on a refrigerator, and then you sing to the refrigerator with the carrot to convince the refrigerator to let the carrots go. You tricked the refrigerator, and then you get a mask. It's great. It's the best. Honestly, I think Pajama Sam 1 might be the best of the games. In terms of, I think the Land of Darkness is just a really cool environment, and I think it holds up. But like the mask can be in one location, and I think the mask can also be in Darkness's house, like on a clock or something, and the clock will hit you if you try to take the mask. But each of those can be in a different place. Like there's a lunchbox that Sam needs, and it can either be next to a wishing well or it can be buried underwater. And so depending on where these items are, you'll get a different puzzle, a different solution. There are items that you can find that won't be useful depending on which puzzles you need to solve. Like there are some rooms where I beat the game the first time, and there were entire rooms that I never found because I didn't need to go there to solve the entirety of the puzzles. And another thing I want to call out from Pajama Sam 1, do you remember the brain tickler?
I do remember the brain tickler.
Do you remember what that is?
No, I don't.
Oh, what are you doing? The brain tickler's the best. It's the best puzzle. Yeah, it's amazing. There are 2 doors, and they are both co-hosts of a game show called the Brain Tickler.
Yeah.
And you pick categories that you have to answer questions about. And
it's a slightly out of place scene, but it
who cares?
it's so good because those characters are great. The two game show hosts, their dialogue is awesome. Their banter, it's it's a funny weird thing, but it's so rewarding.
And it's one of those moments that every single, if you're making children's entertainment, one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever heard is that you need to remember that there's an adult 9 times out of 10 playing alongside their child, or that is there in one way or another. And if your jokes can reach the child, that is great. If they reach the adult will want to play with their child, and they will buy more of your things because the adults have the purse strings.
So yeah, there were plenty of references that only adults would get. Any celebrity impressions that maybe only adults would get.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what came first, if that came first, or if like cartoon shows like Animaniacs that also had that same sort of philosophy that adults should be watching and experiencing this side by side with their children. But yeah, that was something that was happening with a lot of entertainment. Is the visual entertainment should be an experience for everyone, not just the kids. Come on over, watch Saturday cartoons with your kids.
Yeah, and
Yo ho ho.
yep. And so the brain tickler, like with the doors, one, they look great. Like the animators must have had a lot of fun animating all of
Yes.
the different sight gags that exist in Pajama Sam. Like the world of Pajama Sam, almost any object that looks like it could be clickable is clickable, and it has a sight gag associated with it. And so they managed to just cram the world full of all these ridiculous jokes.
Hmm.
Like I clicked on a root and it turned into an old man, and he told me that back in his day, video games were different. Um, but the brain tickler, there will be, for every question that there is, like there'll be an answer that is obvious, and the right answer if you're an adult. And then there'll sometimes be just answers that are ridiculous and only an adult would get why it's funny.
Yes.
Like one of the questions was, how is a star formed? And the answers were, a bunch of gas catches on fire in space, gravity, a chemical reaction, I think, and then the last one was Hollywood promoters. And if you select Hollywood promoters, that is also a correct answer. And Sam
Yeah.
will explain, well, Hollywood promoters, they come along and they just create so much advertising that you feel like if you don't know this person, you're a jerk. It's like, that's not the answer we were expecting, but that is alright. Way to go, brain tickler. Which I think it's just, again, it's a joke for the adult, but I think it hits home, and eventually with the brain tickler, you eventually have to answer one question that's about the land of darkness, and that's that is the actual gating thing behind the brain tickler. But I think that it's just, that whole world, the land of darkness, is full of of cool sight gags and cool jokes for everyone, that it just holds up.
And so that leads us to the second Pajama Sam game, which was
That was Thunder and Lightning Aren't So Frightening.
I think I remember this one the least. Because I certainly remember the first, and I certainly remember the third. But Thunder and Lightning is kind of a bit of a blur to me because, yeah, you take this, because I think if I have my memory jolted, I could probably remember it.
Yeah, so Thunder and Lightning Aren't So Frightening, you probably should forget part of it, or most of it, because it's the most forgettable of the three games. I think it's the worst of the three, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game. Like, you need to find 4 pieces of weather machines, because Sam has screwed up. He shows up at the Ministry of Weather because he wants rain to stop happening, because there's a storm and he's scared of thunder. So I guess I didn't mention, the first game, you're trying to stop darkness because Sam's trying to go to sleep and he's afraid of the dark. And so he wants to go into his closet, into the land of darkness, to capture darkness itself so that he won't be scared of it anymore. And at the end of the game, you find Darkness, and it turns out Darkness is hiding in his own closet from Sam, because Sam, when you find him, Darkness is like, well, I'm a person. Why would you want to jam me in a lunchbox and capture me? That's mean. I don't want to be trapped in a lunchbox.
Which is a really touching moment. It's like, oh, okay.
Darkness is scared of me. And then you play tic-tac-toe with him with cheese and crackers.
Yeah.
And befriend Darkness. So Thunder and Lightning aren't so frightening is Sam being scared of a lightning storm, and so he goes up to the Ministry of Weather, the Weather Corporation. I think it's all corporatized. It's one of those like Beetlejuicy sort of things where they take a fantastical thing and turn it into a big bureaucracy. And so he goes up to try and convince Thunder and Lightning to stop making it rain on his house. And in doing so, he ruins all the weather machines. And it turns out that Lightning is a spastic woman and Thunder is like a deep-voiced, calm woman.
Yeah.
And you try to help them fix their machines. And so there's 4 pieces you need to get. Each of them can be in multiple places, again, which is cool. The jokes are solid. The big jump forward for Pajama Sam 2 is that they actually let you select what seed you're getting when you start the game.
Yes, I do remember that.
So you can actually pick what combination you want. Other big innovation, the carrot is back in Pajama Sam 2.
Even though it doesn't quite make canonical sense to have him in the Ministry of Weather, but sure, whatever. The carrot's great. Just have him.
Actually, they write him in. So there's a snowman.
Oh, okay.
Who checks snowflakes. His job is to work in the snow factory, and that snowman can have one of 2 noses. He can have a carrot nose, or I think a zucchini nose, depending on what seed you get. And if he has a carrot nose, it's the carrot. And you talk to him, and he tells you that he was going to college, learning economics. At I think the college was Cauliflower on Broccoli. Was the name of the college. And so he was studying economics, and so he infiltrated the Weather Corporation to figure out how the workers were treated there, to learn if workers' rights were being managed appropriately.
You would only
so
get
that's
this,
why
you
he's
would,
there.
You would only get what he's talking about if you were an adult. Oh, God.
Exactly. It's the best. And the whole time he's like, cha. So I was just trying to make sure that these workers are being treated fairly, brah. He's the best. His stupid goatee is perfect. His carrot goatee. Oh, he's the best. And so he's actually the solution to a puzzle, because there's a boardroom where people can't figure out how they're going to deal with their finances. And so you need to get the carrot and bring him there so that he can... Oh, no. You want to become a member of the board, and there's an economics test. And there's a question that you can't answer without the carrot giving you hints. And so he tells you how to answer economics questions. And he answers them accurately. It's like tax-related questions, or like diversifying investment portfolios and crap like that. It's amazing. The carrot's the best. And then he becomes a member of the board and runs the company.
Okay, now I remember that. Yes.
Yes,
but
he's great.
I think that what I kind of look back on, like, the lesson of a child or a person being afraid of the darkness made sense. And certainly being afraid of, like, thunder and lightning made sense, but trying to stop weather was a little too much, or was a little too pressing, or a little too abstract. It was not as clear a goal as, like, oh, you're afraid of the darkness. That makes sense. I think as a child you could relate to that.
Yeah, I think that the big mistake with 2 was just that the Land of Darkness was such a fantastical place. It's got this gigantic treehouse. It almost looks Tim Burton-esque.
Yeah, it does.
And
then the Ministry is just not as interesting, or there's a lack of variety with the corporate boardroom environment. It's like the bureaucracy, certainly that they did get the element of, this is why bureaucracies are crazy. It's like instill in the young age the idea that a bureaucracy is this monolithic organization to be avoided. Yes, now our children now understand the evils of the DMV.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Yeah, they capture, but like you said, there's not a visual variety there, and so you can only do so much to make a bureaucracy seem fantastical. Even when their output is sunshine and snowflakes, it
Yeah.
still looks like an office building.
Yes.
And so even when the floor is made of clouds and tiling, it doesn't feel as out there as like the giant treehouse in the center of the Land of Darkness, or the
Yeah.
giant, or the mines, or Otto the boat, who's scared of water.
Yeah.
Who's the best? Otto's pretty great. If you want educational from Pajama Sam 1, he will tell you about geysers for about 5 minutes, which is
There are weird things where if you want to learn more about items, usually will provide you that information. There are really weird moments in all of the humongous games where the game will actually stop to tell you more if you tried to prompt the game to tell you a little bit more. Um,
mm-hmm.
Freddy the Fish would go on about different varieties of fish. That was his thing. And
Yeah, Pajama Sam has more tood than Freddy the Fish and
yes,
Putt Putt. Like, when Otto the boat starts telling you about geysers, he then immediately, after maybe like 30 seconds,
it's like,
a
oh
warning
God,
on the bottom starts flashing that says gratuitous educational
I
content
remember
warning,
that. I remember that. I remember that
and then
was
Sam
hilarious.
slowly falls asleep.
Yes.
And you can escape it at any time. Oh, also worth mentioning, you can escape any animation in Pajama Sam, just hitting
Yes.
the spacebar, which was cool. They are not so wedded to their animations that they make you watch them.
More games should allow you to do that. More
Yep.
games, yes.
Especially games aimed at kids. Short attention spans they have. Um,
Unskippable cutscenes are the worst.
yeah, so the second Pajama Sam is cool. You eventually get all of the pieces of this machine, and then Mother Nature shows up, and she's a jerk. And Thunder and Lightning are very scared of Mother Nature. She's got like a radish head.
Yeah,
It's weird. It's weird.
maybe a little on the stereotypical side in terms of the depiction of Mother Nature.
Yep. And
Maybe a little, yeah.
Thunder and Lightning as well. I did like there was a character who was a stapler, who was way into, I think, sandwiches. He really liked sandwiches, and so you have to give him a sandwich to distract him. There's a character that's a stapler, and there's a character that's a staple remover. Actually, the staple remover liked sandwiches. The stapler was incompetent and in charge of the storeroom,
Yeah.
and he just wanted you to not tell his boss how incompetent he was.
Yeah.
But
It was that.
yeah, 2 is okay, and then 3, I think, was
A little bit of a return to form. Because I
yes.
remember 3 a lot better than I remember 2. It's like the Indiana Jones trilogy. 1 was really good, 2 is okay, and then 3 is a return to form. Kind of like going back on the original ideas and the original things that made it special. Because
Yeah, I
3 is a lot more fantastical than 2. Maybe not as much as 1, but still much more fantastical and has greater variety. I'm
yeah,
sorry, I
2
interrupted your introduction. What is the title for 3?
3 is you are what you eat from your head to your feet. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've just thought of Pajama Sam and said, "Yeah, this is the Indiana Jones of video games."
Yes,
It clearly.
because 3, the game is already established that food can talk and food is interactable, which is actually, when you stop and think about it, it's like, oh, are all the carrots livable, breathing creatures? Is Sam a murderer? Am I a murderer? Like, that's kind of like one of those things where if you stop and think about it, it's like, oh, okay, so we just need to accept that some, not all, can talk and have a soul or something like that. But
Have wants and needs.
yeah, but no, yeah, 3 is a really crazy adventure.
It is kind of funny when now that you're mentioning it, because the world of Pajama Sam 3 is it's supposed to be your body basically.
Yes.
And there's food everywhere, and then there's like the foothills that are feet. Also puns. Pajama Sam loves puns. It loves puns so much, and as someone who loves puns, it touches me right here in my heart. But Pajama Sam 3 is just the apex of their puns. And so it's supposed to take place in his body, and as a result, you've got food and stuff all over the place. And some of the food is okay to eat because I guess it's not alive, and some of the food is very much alive and is very concerned with what you're doing. Like, one of the solutions is eat bonbons and then use bonbons to solve problems, which is way better than a chicken with a pulley in the middle. Yeah, I thought it's kind of funny because the didactic message of Pajama Sam 1 and 2 are so obvious and so clear, but 3, somehow they managed to muddle it a little bit just because throughout the game, Sam is just eating garbage. It's supposed to be about how you're not supposed to eat garbage, but throughout the game, he is just eating candy and nonsense all the time, and he never gets sick. But I guess it's supposed to be... I guess he's in his own body or something. It's weird. He wakes up at a party full of junk food, and the junk food eventually turns on him. Mm-hmm. When he stops eating cake, they're like, "You're not going to eat any more cake? The heck?" And then they throw you in jail.
Yeah. But it's like, oh, so the cake wants to be digested? Like, is that the message? Is the message that... That's
Junk
a
food
weird
is
one.
Intolerant. Junk food is intolerant of other foods, and it cannot abide other foods being present in the stomach. That is what I learned. But let me just list some of these amazing puns.
Yeah, okay.
There are some guards. Guess what they are?
What are they?
They're gourds.
That's pretty good. Okay.
So they're tomatoes, and they only let gourds through, and so you eventually have to go through wearing a pumpkin mask so that they'll let you through, so you're a gourd. There are plumbers. Guess what they are?
What are they?
They're plums.
Yep.
There's the foothills.
What are they?
Feet.
Yeah.
Their feet. I think there are finger lakes.
Okay.
Shaped like fingers.
Fingers.
I think there are some other... Oh, there's some Mode 7 in this game.
There is.
Or something that looks very much like Mode 7 in this game. Do you remember what the circumstances are behind that?
Is that the mine train sequence? Or the train car sequence?
That's in Pajama Sam 1.
Okay,
There's no Mode 7, though. In Pajama Sam 3, there is I think you're in a stomach.
Yeah.
And there are cans that dance.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I think this is one of the potential solutions. So in Pajama Sam 3, what you need to do is you have to rescue 4 diplomats who are going to be at a food summit at the food pyramid to discuss the terms of a treaty between junk food and all the other food groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to rescue the 4 missing delegates. So you have to rescue, I think it's Pierre Lepon, who's bread.
Mm-hmm. He's a French baguette, by the way.
Yes,
you might have got that.
By his name. There's Chuck Cheddar, cheese of action.
Which cheese is not the best representation of dairy, but okay.
I just love Chuck Cheddar. He's got a really strong cleft. He basically looks like the Crimson Chin from The Fairly Odd Parents, except wearing aviator glasses.
Yep.
There's a Granny Apple. She's fine. She's not... I forget her name, but she's old because she's a Granny Smith. And then the last one is a kidney bean.
Bean, yep. Well, of course they picked beans. Because that led to fart jokes.
There were no fart jokes that I remember.
Well, it's implied, but sure.
I don't remember an explicit fart joke.
They didn't go down there. You're certainly right. But there's a maturity in that they rein it in terms of like they will only go so far in terms of like their humor.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have to realize and they recognize, man, if we break this trust with our audience and the parents that bought this game, they're not going to buy any of our other games.
Yep.
So if we,
Putt Putt.
yeah,
If they think Putt Putt is full of smut,
they
they're not
ain't
gonna buy it.
they ain't gonna buy Putt Putt Save the Zoo.
My kid learned about farting from Pajama Sam.
Yeah.
The devil farts. Yeah, so I thought that just the puns were good. Like the cans when they're bouncing, if the cans are the problem, if they are bouncing around the Granny Smith apple, you have to go in there, and in the room with the cans, the stomach is undulating with like mode 7 like animations, and it's horrifying. It's the worst.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's a celery person. There's a celery stalk that teaches you etiquette. Mm-hmm. And then there's another celery stalk who teaches you how to dance.
Yep, I remember that.
There's I think a sticky bun who is reading an amazing book. I think it's called like Peddlers in Pittsburgh or something, or Loveless in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And she just will keep, as many times as you talk to her, she will keep telling you about this ridiculous plotline of this romance novel that she's reading. And that's great. You can find a fortune cookie, a wise fortune cookie who asks 3 very important questions about cheese that you have to find the answer to. He wants to know what cheese the moon is made of. What is the cheese on a perfect cheese sandwich? And I forget what the third cheese-related question was. But the cheese sandwich, I believe, was Munster.
That is not the correct answer, though, but sure.
That was the perfect cheese.
That's not the perfect cheese.
It's for a perfect cheese sandwich, apparently it's Munster. I don't know.
Habanero Jack, man.
That's pretty extreme. I don't know.
Got to get some flavor in your cheese.
Yeah, but Munster is just solid cheese. Like, you've got the taste of the cheese. If the cheese tastes good, you don't need other flavors.
You need other flavors. What you gonna put in that cheese sandwich? Mayonnaise on both sides? You can't put mustard on that thing.
Bread.
Bread, maybe some tomatoes.
No. You don't pollute the purity of the cheese with other condiments. You experience the cheese that is meant to be experienced.
Mayonnaise, cheese, tomatoes. Salt and pepper on it.
Ugh. This impure cheese sandwich is making me upset.
But no, yeah, the Pajama Sam 3 is a fantastical journey. And to its credit, it does address, like, it does, like, have a didactic purpose. I think it gets a little cloudy with that didactic purpose, that educational purpose, because it does kind of humorously treat the idea that you should have a balanced diet. You should really eat more fruits and vegetables. And it doesn't really completely commit to being entirely factual or something like that, but it kind of just does it in this humorous and kind of more open-minded manner of, you should really eat well. Yeah.
Yeah, eat well. Just do it.
Just
do what
eat
we
well.
say, not what we do.
Don't eat a bunch of cake. There's a pile of cake and it'll get angry at you.
It'll get angry at you and throw you in cake jail. I do enjoy the fact that they realized that the carrot was the greatest character that they had invented. And so the third game is in the carrot's home turf.
Yep.
So the carrot comes back, and unlike the other 2 games where you can miss the carrot if you don't get the right seed, the carrot is an integral part of Pajama Sam 3.
So stop and think about that. For some people, in a weird, odd world, Pajama Sam could have been the first time they had seen the carrot.
Yeah, Pajama Sam 3. And the carrot is the least carroty in Pajama Sam 3.
Yeah.
He's the least communist in Pajama Sam 3. In 1 and 2, he's talking about ownership is theft, and he's talking about going to college to learn about economics and labor rights. In Pajama Sam 3, he's just trying to stop a radish general from declaring war. He's not saying ownership is theft. He's not saying that we need to strike down the means of production or seize the means of production. He's just saying don't go to war, man. Which is, it's more to his accent, but the thing that always struck me about the Carrot was how much he was a ridiculous communist and a surfer.
Yeah.
And kind of a hippie. But they lost it a little bit in 3. I was disappointed because I thought that the Carrot would play an integral role and it would be the triumphant moment of the Carrot. It turns out first appearance of the Carrot was the greatest. Like so many great things. First time was the best.
Yeah. There are other elements of, like, you can kind of tell that I forget what the story behind Humongous. I believe they just got bought out and most of the talent left. But surprise, surprise, when you buy names and you don't have any of the stuff that made it special, it doesn't really connect with the audience as well. And then also, most of the people who played Pajama Sam got old. And the other big scary thing was that ed tech just fell apart. You had the bankruptcy of Leapfrog, and so the idea of investing time and resources in terms of software on children, that had lost favor with a lot of businesses and the markets as a whole. And then, look at what happened to THQ. Look at what happened to Mattel when they had their whole buyout era of the 90s. It was a weird time when you could make something like Pajama Sam that could get approved, and people would buy it regardless of the age. I remember having fun playing this with my older brother, my older stepbrother. And he was at least 12 or 13 years. He was a teenager at that point, and he thought the puns were hilarious.
Yeah, because the puns are hilarious. And the sight jokes are still solid. Like, you eventually you go to a Muscle Beach, and there are stud muffins that are muffins.
That are buff.
And then they are hitting on cupcakes.
Yep.
And that's great. Like, I think the world of Pajama Sam 3 is actually the biggest of all of the Pajama Sam games, and it is also the densest somehow, with jokes and puns and all that stuff. There's a chuckle hut where someone's telling knock-knock jokes, and you need to basically convince a banana that he can be funny again in order to get the stupid knock-knock joke guy to stop.
Yeah. I always feel like when I play those games that I have to click everything because I must be missing something. There must be some sort of obscure corner that I haven't clicked yet. And there's always,
that is the biggest joke.
That is the biggest joke.
Yeah, you don't want to miss out. So Pajama Sam 3, you beat it. They have a treaty, and it tells you to eat a balanced meal.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. But I really enjoyed going back to these games and finding out that they were as good as I remembered, and probably better because I didn't appreciate some of the subtle design decisions at the time. Again, it was good to experience this with fresh eyes. I don't know the last time you played these games. I guess it was probably over a decade ago.
No, and here's the reason why I realized that I did boot up not like 4 or 5 years ago my copy of Putt Putt's Saves the Zoo, and what happens is I click something and then I all of a sudden uncover in one obscure screen, there was a hidden hide and go seek puzzle in the game that was totally obscured, and I had never discovered it when I first played it, and I played it like 8 or 9 times. And so it kind of this flood of memories just came through. It's like, oh man, is there something I'm missing out? And Pajama Sam probably, and then yeah, those games are great. They are. I wish that genre, that subset of games, child-friendly, family-friendly, existed in a way to where anyone could enjoy it.
Yeah, and without the barrier, like one of the great things about Pajama Sam is there's no barrier of execution.
Yeah.
For the most part, like the games that are child-friendly, family-friendly, are mostly Nintendo games, and there's still a barrier to control execution. Like when I tried to play with my little cousins, play like just a Mario game, they can't hack it with the jumping.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to get the timing, and so oftentimes they would just hand me the controller, and that's not the experience you want. Whereas Pajama Sam, a child could be in control of it and still have progress, and you can still give them feedback without wresting control away from them, which I think is important.
Yeah.
And cool thing from Pajama Sam 3 that I didn't mention before, you do eventually solve racial strife.
Yes.
At one point, you solve racial strife. I don't know if you remember the beans.
No, there are different. There's the green beans that don't like. Yes, they don't like the different types of beans. Then you bring them together as if they're a group of people. They're all beans together.
Yep. Kidney beans and jelly beans don't like each other. They're on strike. Because kidney beans don't want to work with jelly beans no more.
Because jelly beans are candy. They ain't healthy. They're not going to give you your nutrients.
They're all hopped up on sugar. They don't have these proteins that we need at the bean factory.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the way you solve it is you distract them for like 2 seconds, and then you switch their signs so that the ones that say jelly beans rule are then held by the kidney beans, and the ones that say kidney beans are awesome are held by the jelly beans. And so all of a sudden they think they love each other.
Yeah.
And it solves racial strife.
That's what we should do with the entire world.
Yeah, you just take all their signs of like weird supremacist stuff, and then you hand it to people who they are prejudiced against, and then everyone's happy. That's how that works, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so Pajama Sam, super awesome. Thank you for letting me play this as the second part of this. So,
like I said, Myst is weird. Myst really does, in terms of like the original vision for Myst, it's 1, it's 2, 3 and 4 were made by completely different studios, and then 5 was the members of Cyan that survived the bankruptcy that they created on themselves for trying to create an MMORPG, not an MMORPG, an MMO version of Myst, which, surprise, it wasn't that great. It essentially became a chat room because everyone solved those puzzles. There was a chat that just would discuss how. And,
what do you think the books mean?
I don't know. Do I put the peg here? What does this letter translate to? And it's like, yeah, guys, way to put millions and millions of. There's a weird moment in Myst 5, the last Myst game. You're never going to play Myst 5. So
no.
You solve the game. It's not the best game, but there's a really touching moment where you solve the game, you solve all the problems, and you essentially need to pick what the fate of the Djinn, or the people are.
Mm-hmm.
And then a portal opens up, and then you go back to Myst Island. And I don't know if this was put in here purposely to say that, no, this is the end, this is where we are at, but Myst Island's completely destroyed. It's just dilapidated, it's fallen apart, it's just this wreck and this ruin. And part of me wants to say that that was kind of where the state of Myst was by the time Myst 5 came around. Part of me wants to say that it was Cyan recognizing that, yeah, we screwed up. We didn't do a good job. Sorry. And then part of me wants to say that, nah, you know what? That's probably the best way to end that series with. Is the idea that things have changed and you have to move on. But hey, we had a little fun with Myst. We had hopefully some fun with Riven, and we definitely had fun. You definitely had fun with Pajama Sam.
Yeah, I had fun with all of these games. There were frustrations. I think because I had the Myst Masterpiece Edition, I had a hint system that I guess was not present in the original Myst. So that helped a ton. There should be a hint system in Riven. That would be really nice. That'd be a nice innovation.
The Steam version for Myst should be better.
Yes, it should be. You should be allowed to save. That was a problem. It'd be nice if the PC version of Pajama Sam 4, even if it's a bad game, it'd be nice if it ran. if I could at least experience it.
So you're saying that Steam games should actually work when you purchase them?
That would be nice. If only there was like a refund system.
Which came
That'd
into
be
place
crazy.
well after the fact you bought that.
Actually, I could have tried to return Pajama Sam
But you would have
before.
to return the entire thing.
That's the problem. And I figured I got my money's worth out of the Pajama Sam games I did play. But yeah, that was a problem for a bit. But yeah, I really enjoyed playing these games, and so I think that's going to be it for the discussion of Riven, Myst, and Pajama Sam. So if you're familiar with Deep Listens, you can always get at the show. I always mention this, but
The worst.
you can get at the show.
The real podcast is about to start after this. The real
Yes,
podcast.
this was the precursor. So if you have any feedback, hit me up at thatpinguino on Twitter, thatpinguino@gmail.com. You can hit up the comments at deeplistens.libsyn.com. There are comments for every podcast we put up. You can comment there. Feel free to add your opinions. Maybe I was completely off base on some of this stuff. Maybe I don't understand the true meaning of Pajama Sam or the true meaning of happiness. But thank you very much, Zombie Pie. Thank you, Chris, for talking this
Anytime.
stuff out.
And we shall
Next time-
we shall return to deal with some stuff. We've got to talk.
Final Fantasy VIII.
The-
So next time,
I'm a changed man. I don't know if you're a changed man from your experience, but we need to talk.
we do. So this was a precursor. This was the appetizer. Because next time we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy VIII. It's so good and so bad and it's so many things.
I have
all
some
at
things
once.
to say. I have so many questions. I don't even know anymore.
And I have so many answers. I have a guidebook. I'm going to play it again. If we don't record quickly, I might have played it a full time before we record. If we don't play it quickly, if we don't record quickly enough. Because I hate myself.
God, I don't.
It's only 12 hours.
It's why would you do this to yourself? What? Why? Why? This is almost as bad as the PSP discussion we had earlier, but that's for another time.
I learned how to speedrun games so I can play them in a reasonable amount of time.
You're a crazy person.
This is what I have to do. All right, so next time we're going to be discussing Final Fantasy VIII. The regularly scheduled podcasts will continue coming on the regular too. Hopefully, it's usually a bi-weekly schedule. We had some technical difficulties with our Child of Light podcast, so that kind of threw stuff off for a little bit. But we should be back on the bi-weekly schedule. So these two podcasts will not disrupt that. So the Tomb Raider podcast is still on the way. If this somehow comes out after the Tomb Raider podcast,
Science.
we live in the future. I don't know what's happening. So, thank you once again for joining me.
Bye.
Bye. Usually people do sign offs, but that is whatever. Thank you, listeners, once again for listening. Peace.
Peace.